Yes, thanks a lot. I hope, yeah, the other panelists will join us soon. But anyway, in the meanwhile, I'm very happy to welcome you to this panel on Trustworthy AI for a Fair World. I'm Tatiana Tomasi. I'm a researcher at Politecnico di Torino in Italy, and I'm also a scholar at ELLIS, so the European Lab for Learning and Intelligent Systems. I welcome the audience, of course, and in particular, I also welcome our guests and panelists. I will introduce you in a minute. So the idea in general of the panel is instead of sharing our experiences on topics related to the existence of bias in the world, actually. Well, the point is that whenever we take a decision as human beings, we are affected by some biases. And in some cases, we ask for the help of AI systems, AI tools. But the point is that if we are not aware of the presence of these biases, then the AI system may end up amplifying prejudices and societal stereotypes. So we have to be careful in the way in which we use them. So in general, we know that AI models and AI systems are really powerful. They are supportive when we make a decision, but yeah, we have to be aware of the presence of the bias and knowing how to use them properly. So in general, the panel will focus on what several research laboratories, startups, and foundations can do to support decision makers in Europe when dealing in general with all the challenges related to societal biases and the development of trustworthy AI systems. So in particular, today we have with us Gaela Bernini, who's Secretary General at the Fondazione Bracco. Welcome, Gaela. And she will tell us more about the women empowerment initiatives of B20. We also have Mary Ataya, who is a CEO and co-founder of Sidot, which is a startup with a mission of developing responsible AI ecosystems. They're working with several public authorities, SMEs, and startups exactly with this goal. I will also provide a brief description of my work related on computer vision and machine learning, so on my side. And with us, we should also have Bernard Niesler. Let me just check if he joined. Okay, not yet. Anyway, Bernard is a professor at University of Linz, the Johannes Kepler University in Austria, and is also one of the founders of the AI Excellence Initiatives as ELISE, and in general, the European Lab for Learning and Intelligent Systems. What I will do now is that I will just leave the floor maybe to Gaela. So you will be the first, and you can share with us your experience.
Thank you, Tatiana. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for this invitation. So I will now try to answer what the corporate foundation can do, such as Bracco Foundation, to deal with the challenges of the societal challenges of artificial intelligence. So to start, I want to draw a line towards gender medicine, because as the Bracco Foundation is the corporate foundation of a group that is active in the healthcare, this is a field that I know better than others. So research in the medical field in the last 50 years has been conducted in male experimental animals and in men. But pathophysiology, clinics, therapy, and prevention is far different in all diseases in women. This is why the gender medicine was born as a subject only in the early 90s, to take into account differences between men and women. It all started in 91 with an article which showed that women had worse outcomes following heart attack, since their symptoms are different from men and they were treated as men. Things now are slowly changing, and epidemiological and clinical studies report results not only on one sex, but they include also the two sexes. So women, men, and male. Women and men. I provide you another example regarding COVID-19, which causes millions of deaths worldwide. But it also has a series of long-standing symptoms that have been observed in post-COVID patients. It is the so-called long COVID syndrome. In the last months, research studies gained several novel insights regarding virus mechanism of infection, the spreading, the study of vaccines, and so on. However, a surprising scenario is now emerging from these studies. There is a significant difference between women and men in the lethality of this infection, which is higher in men, and in the post-COVID syndrome, which is higher in fertile women. All these questions still need to be tackled. Okay, this is just an example to provide you a sort of forward that should just tell you that research models need to be gender balanced. Gender-specific medicine is now trying to reconstruct this equilibrium, but this is also valid in other research and application fields, such as artificial intelligence. So, in all R&D cycles, the specific needs of women cannot be ignored. And let me enter now in the experience that we just had in the last 6 months of the B20 that Tatiana was just telling you. As you probably know, Italy is owns the presidency this year of the G20. And Confindustria, which is the National Business Association, organizes the B20, the engagement group of businesses, that this year sees over 2,000 participants from the G20 countries, including all major global corporations. Among the task forces of the B20, one was dedicated to the themes of gender parity and inclusion, and was guided by Diana Bracco, the president of Bracco Foundation. This is why in the last 6 months, with all the representatives of the corporation from the G20 countries, we realized a policy framework on women empowerment. And we decided to dedicate a special attention to fairness in AI. I just provide you some data. Globally, women are estimated to account for less than 30% of R&D employees, ranging from 58 in Central Asia to just 18% in South and West Asia. This lack of women conducting research is compounded by a lack of gender representation in the research studies. For example, in the technology arena, men's needs are often treated as default, with the new product and services just then adapted for women. These gender imbalances have serious consequences. For example, in diseases which manifest differently in women compared to men, as I just said before in the case of gender medicine. Artificial intelligence is very important, as it is a key, because it underpins new services, such as precision medicine, and it is designed on dataset, which can be biased. So it is very important now to study it to avoid the risk of discrimination and biases in this dataset. And this is why the first recommendation of the special initiative dedicated to women empowerment advocate for gender balance across high growth, high impact activities, such as the design, development, and delivery of health and advanced technologies. It calls to embed a gender lens at the core of all innovative activities. Increase gender equity. It also advocates to increase gender equity in research and development, and to develop a gender-sensitive ethical guidelines in the key areas, such as artificial intelligence. We have shared this proposal with all the major representatives of the major corporation, and they all agree. So now we will hand over this document to the Prime Minister, and then they will discuss the full manifest of the B20 during the summit, which will be held at the end of October in Rome. We still need to track the results of our work, but what is important is to advocate, to consciously advocate about this issue. This is a call for new research, new knowledge, and new training. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks a lot, Gaila. I don't know if there are some questions in the audience, or we can also take them afterwards in case.
Tatiana, I propose that first of all the questions are oral so that they are recorded, and maybe if it's short questions, then they can follow each presentation and then have discussion also at the end. That was the pattern we followed in the morning, but it's up to you to how you want to chair.
No, it's fine. I mean, for me, any general organization, it's fine. I don't know if there are some specific question, or we can go ahead and then we can discuss at the end, if not. Okay. So if there are not a punctual question on this specific presentation, I would go ahead with Mary Ataya. So yes, I hope I'm pronouncing your surname correctly.
Yeah, it's it was very good. Hataya is how we say. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so yeah, the floor
so
is
we have
yours.
around 10 minutes or
yeah, about
yeah, okay. So let me share my screen. Thank you for Gaia for the previous presentation. Super exciting work that you're doing there. Okay, this is, you can see my slide. All right. So yeah, thanks for the opportunity to share a little bit of our work. I'm Meri Hatea, I'm CEO and co-founder of Cited, which is a company focused on AI governance and transparency specifically. We started 3 years ago when we noticed that AI ethics is a growing area, and a lot of companies started to put together AI principles for this area. And when we worked in different contexts with these organizations, being part of that work as well, we noticed that there are little answers on how do we operationalize those principles. So that was something that we got super excited and started to work on focusing on operationalizing those principles, and especially from the perspective of transparency. Today we're working with a lot of public organizations, but also private companies, large and small companies. Our mission is really, we are excited about this idea about how do we enable responsible AI ecosystems by making world-leading best practice, AI governance best practices and mechanisms affordably available for anyone. So companies who don't have all those resources, whether those are public organizations or small Asian AI companies who don't have all those resources to hire experts, own research teams on AI ethics, how can we support and sort of make best tools and best practices available for everyone? And that's where we're focusing, and technology has a key role there. Cities of Amsterdam and Helsinki published already about 1 year ago their public AI registers, which have become sort of a benchmark globally on how public organizations can address transparency and build citizen trust with relation to how they are using AI, and we are behind those registers operating. The registers are operated on our platform, and we are also running the consumer or citizen-facing sites as well. Today, where I wanted to focus, I won't go, there will be a separate session about the AI Act, and there would be a lot of topics to discuss around that one. But this is just one slide summary on from a transparency and documentation perspective, what is in there. And from this, we already see that whole concept of multi-stakeholder transparency is at the heart how we are regulating or going to regulate AI going forward in Europe, but also beyond. So on the left-hand side is something that where my following slides will focus. How do we enable, like through our platform, to make it easy or as easy as possible for organizations, AI providers, to put in place this systematic technical documentation around how the system works, but also how is it governed, how non-discrimination, bias-related topics have been addressed, what are the risks and how they are managed and so forth. Another very interesting concept in the AI Act, which I'm happy to discuss with anyone who might be interested about this going further, is the instructions of use concept. And that is namely documentation now required from AI providers, the ones who develop AI, and they are supposed to provide that information for any user organizations who are using these technologies developed by provider. That will be also part of the EU database, so publicly available for anyone. And this is one thing of which I'm very happy about in the AI Act. It will significantly improve the overall transparency into how these AI systems work. So the question, how do we make all of this happen, and so that it's not going to be unbearable cost driver for the organizations as well, and how do we enable it in a systematic manner? This is let me try to get that. Yeah, so this is a view from our platform. So we've been now developing our platform for 3 years in a very close collaboration, co-development mode with our customers. At the moment, we're still in beta, but the platform is being used by many organizations, large and small ones. So it already provides value for our customers, which is obviously happy thing or place to be in. But the idea, shortly, is that through our platform, our customers create AI registers. And now what you see here is the internal perspective into this one. It's a SaaS platform used by AI development teams, but also AI governance, other AI governance related people, privacy experts, AI ethicists, and so forth. Our customers can come to our platform and they basically register the new AI systems that are in the development phase in the organizations. And through the platform, we are basically guiding the AI teams through the governance workflow, everything that needs to be covered in, while doing developing responsible AI, while developing AI that is also in compliance with the current and upcoming regulations in this area. How does it show then in practice is that our customers, depending on which template they are using, which industry, what kind of AI system they are developing, they will interface then forms that have all that information that is also defined by the AI Act required documentation. And we guide in the platform, this user guides also the users so that they have a common understanding about the concepts and what is supposed to be thought through, governed, and documented in this area. It's also a place where we also gather, for example, test reports related to bias tests and data protection impact assessments and so forth. This is one example about how the governance might differ when we are talking about different kinds of systems. So, for example, right now we are implementing a specific template for AI that is used in relation to children, or which is impacting either directly or indirectly children. So when developing that kind of a system, our customers would use this kind of this template where they are faced with all the typical areas, but also a child rights impact assessment template which allows them to basically go through UNICEF's AI principles related to AI for children and really make sure that they are covering all the necessary information related to those questions. Then a couple more just the teasers about some interesting perspectives that we're taking right now and working on right now. Whole supply chain transparency is a very interesting question, and what I discussed about the instructions of use concept in AI Act. So information that needs to be flowing from AI vendor to the user organization so that the users are able to properly oversee and manage this system. So this is what we're going to make easy from our platform. Large organizations who are using third parties AI services can come to our platform and basically start sending requests for vendor product transparency. They give a name of the vendor product that they are using or interested in and contact email to our platform. And basically what happened is that the AI vendor is getting a request for transparency from this customer of theirs. And by starting to, or like, following the link then from email, the AI vendor is onboarded on our platform to create exactly that documentation that is required by AI Act in future, and provided a possibility to share that information with the requesting customer or with the whole sided ecosystem through our marketplace. So that's something what we really want to do is to make it easy for all parties to share the essential information related to how these systems work, what data has been used, and how should we manage, oversee these systems to make sure that they are working properly. One final thing before closing, I have 10 minutes now in my clock. So a few days ago, I asked in Twitter a question regarding something that I've been thinking and working for quite a while now, an idea about how can we build new mechanisms for regular citizens, and also different kinds of experts who are interested in contributing on how public organizations are using AI. How could they be developing those systems in a more responsible manner? The question was that, would you be interested to participate this kind of citizen AI jury or reviewer panel to provide your expertise and views to government AI teams on helping them see possible impacts and also possible problems early in the development process. And there was a lot of interest based on this tweet, but not only based on these tweets, but also based on the validation that we have done within our networks. And this is something that we're now really looking into and maybe finalizing my briefing with the call. So if you're interested in this kind of either as an expert in, for example, child rights in the context of AI or some other other domain, or then as a regular citizen, if you're interested to be part of something, creating and piloting something in this area, how to bring your contribution to the government AI teams, I would love to hear about you and connect you with the upcoming pilots on this area. So there are my contact details, and looking forward to keeping in touch related to that one. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Mary. It seems that there is one question. Maybe we can go ahead directly with the question if it is for Mary. So I see Akis Papadopoulos.
Yes, it's a question for Mary.
Okay, go ahead.
First of all, thank you very much for the interesting presentation. I wonder whether this platform addresses mainly transparency, or it can also support accountability. So if it turns out that an algorithm or a system registered in this platform does not do as it is presented to do. Is there any way to report this or to keep track of, you know, bad behavior of such a system?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and you know, my favorites are transparency and accountability, and transparency sort of as a means to implement or enable accountability. So from that perspective, it's a very important topic for us, and I think we can address that or look at it from so many different perspectives. Like the things that we have done already on the platform is that we support the AI teams themselves to be very clear regarding the responsibilities. So, and that is something that has been a good learning point for a lot of organizations with whom we have been working. In general, I think there is no common practice on like, you know, assigning product ownership for this and sort of allocating the responsibilities within the team. So that's something that we already on the platform support to be very explicit and to identify the external players involved, and also identify auditors if there are such. What comes to then this sort of mechanisms for indicating, or if you get some evidence that the system is not working properly, I think that is at least directly related to these public AI register concepts that are created by public organizations. So in those, I know already from the work that we have been doing with our customers and the mechanisms that, for example, in the Amsterdam algorithm register, there is already feedback possibility in each and every system that is part of the register. So citizens can report, and or if they are unsatisfied with the way how the system has been described, it's not clear, or if they are, you know, have any kind of feedback. So that's the first place where or one place where they can provide feedback. Obviously, public organizations have official objection routes also, where you can like, you know, provide this official objections, and then that will be followed according to the local regulations and procedures on that one. So so yes, I would say that the topic is very important and interesting for a lot of our customers, and we're definitely looking for different ways how to make all of these different kinds of feedback loops possible, even seeking for third-party auditing through our platform by our customers or partners. So
okay, thank you very much. That's
you're
clear.
welcome. Thanks.
Okay, Ioannis, you have another question? We don't hear you.
Sorry. I have the following question. Is there an illegal obligation for AI service providers to register their software or their solution anywhere right now?
I don't think so, not yet. So but the AI Act is something that has been now and but like, you know, there are ideas related to that one, and if that happens, then AI vendors are required to register high risk AI vendors or are required to register them in the EU database of high risk standalone systems.
The reason I'm asking this is because in the next panel we have discussion on possible legal personalities for AI systems. So before going there, the question is whether we should require systems to be formally registered and have a unique number and also a unique owner and so on, in case there are problems, at least for AI systems that are very anthropomorphic and can be misunderstood as humans. So if they are beyond the so-called uncanny valley, then they are very realistic. In my view, they should be registered, and the people should know whom they are talking with.
I fully agree, and that would happen if the AI Act is going through as it's planned. I have to correct myself. So now that EU database in AI Act has been planned for the standalone AI system. So what, if we are talking about medical devices, for example, and or other AI products in industries which already are regulated, and there are processes related to registering and certifications in those existing regulations. So that is what is in place already, but solely from this AI perspective and any of those standalone systems, the EU database would basically solve or be the answer to that one, and I'm also supporting very much that myself.
Okay, maybe let me just check. I see more questions, but I just want to be sure if our third panelist, so Bernard Nestor, is here. Does not seem so.
There is a question by Mr. Heine. He raised his hand.
Yes,
Professor
yes, we can go ahead with a question from Professor Heine. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. Sorry that I'm a little bit late in this wonderful conference, but I had to teach all the morning. And here's my question for Mary. Obviously, your company or your business is doing wonderful work in the sphere of legitimacy, accountability, and also explainability of AI. And if I have understood correctly, you are a company or a little bit also an NGO. And I wonder what you think about how the market will develop, because you said rightly, it might be when more of those public obligations come that the public can provide your service, your company can provide it, or so to say, the big AI champions, the Googles and the Amazons and so on and so forth, could also play a role in this market. So it is a little bit my question: if you would look into the glass ball, how what your opinion is, how the market will develop, and if it is not too sensitive, my question, what do you expect from your business if the regulation comes and makes this business really profitable?
That's like interesting but a rare question in this this kind of context. So happy to comment on that one. Obviously, I think if we're using as a reference, for example, what happened after GDPR and implementing the data protection related requirements, there is obviously naturally a new market emerging in this area, surrounded around how to help organizations in tackling these questions and problems and issues. I believe in the market dynamics and mechanisms, so that I think this is definitely an area where it is very optimal to see a lot of new companies, players, providers emerge compared to trusting, for example, EU or any government organization to sort of provide the answer for this one. We already know that there are a lot of questions, like we need solutions for how to make this whole compliance and governance efficient as well. There has been also a lot of critiques coming from private companies, organizations around the burden that we are introducing with AI Act. I have tried myself to also by writing, for example, with Joanna Brisson, an article around this cost, because there is a lot of misinformation floating around on these topics. But definitely, I think it is a very valid and important question to be discussed now in this phase of the process. How do we make this happen in an efficient way and so forth? So I believe how I see this this developing and basically the background is that there is there is a lot of commonalities in general to any other risk management domains in general in technologies and overall corporate governance and risk management domains. So we are getting a lot of inspiration from there. Also a lot of inspiration from the whole ESG, corporate social responsibility space, and how that area has been tackled with the help of the data management platforms and technologies there. So yeah, we are estimating the market to be something around, from the AI investments in general, I would say around 5% of the AI market will be somewhere around AI governance related activities. So in general, across industries, of course, there are a lot of industries where this will be a bigger thing, and then areas where it will be smaller. But that already makes it interesting market, and hopefully we're seeing a lot of competition in this space as well.
Okay. Thanks for the question and for the answers. I don't know, we have one panelist actually missing, but in the meanwhile, I can also share my own experience. Let me share the screen. Okay, you should be able to see that. So as I was mentioning at the beginning, I'm a researcher at Politecnico di Torino. I'm working in the area of computer vision and machine learning. And so in practice, I mean, machine learning is the real engine which is moving AI at the moment. And these algorithms are now behind all the tools that you use every day, like just a selection of the emails and spam and interesting email, or just looking at faces, finding faces in an image and focusing on them when you take a picture, all the instruments that we use, and the recommending system that are exploited when, for instance, we want to buy something and we get suggestions. Let's say that it's machine learning is also helping us to find a place and getting there on a map, and help us in many other tasks, from the most simple one, like choosing the program for our washing machine, to the more complex ones, like, for instance, guiding an autonomous car, which is actually at the moment we are not still there, but we're working in that direction. So the problem is that to solve all these tasks means making decisions, right? So we are trying to build tools that help us taking decisions. But if we go back a little bit to how we as human beings take decisions, we have to say that we have to acknowledge that actually we, in general, we tend to be biased. And we have some cognitive bias related to the fact that we have to take lots of decisions at the same time. In general, cognitive biases can be very helpful because allow us to get quick reactions, but in practice, they consist in shortcuts, right? So some short road that we take to get to the decision faster. Now, the problem is that we have to make sure that these biases, they do not translate into stereotypes and then into discrimination. Well, the point is that there are some particular attributes. For instance, let's make the case of hiring a person for a job. Well, when we call people for a job, you have to take into consideration that there are some attributes like gender, ethnicity, or disability, so health status and age that are not really influent for the decision that we have to take. So they should not, we should not rely on the information that this attribute convey with respect to the decision that we have to take. So in practice, we have to make sure that these biases do not then enter also in the process that we develop for artificial intelligence system. Because I mean, biases are there for us as human beings, so in practice are there in the world, and they inevitably translate and appear also in the data that we use to develop artificial intelligence system. And they tend to be also, they might be algorithms that we are dealing with, so all this deep network that we are developing, they might end up increasing the biases if we not pay attention. And the bias, so it's in the data, can be in the algorithm, can be also in the final way in which we use the algorithm. I mean, the final phase, or also the initial phase, let's say, the fact that we develop the algorithm and the fact that we use the algorithm. So as human beings, we have to be aware of the fact that may turn on or off some decision taking by an algorithm on the basis, again, of our own biases. So in general, the bias in this chain of AI can be there, and we have to make sure to not include it actually in the sensitive decisions. But let me formalize exactly, or give an example of what we mean with bias. We know that in practice, this is really impossible to have data sets that do not contain bias. So every time we collect some data, think about images in particular, and work in the area of computer vision, so I'm mainly dealing with images. Collecting a neutral data set, it's practically impossible. But let's make the case a little bit extreme. So let's say that our goal is that of training a model for autonomous driving, and all our data are collected in daylight conditions. So let's say that the decision at the end, it's a very simple one, to turning left or right, and all our data is taken in daylight. And so we build a model in this condition. But then at test time, we might find ourselves in a daylight condition, but also it can be night. There might be snow, there might be fog. We can have different weather conditions. So in practice, the existence of this difference, which is called domain shift, is also takes the name of domain bias, causes a big drop in performance of our model. And we have to be aware of that. So let me make a little bit even more general this concept of dataset bias and domain bias, and so the possibility of domain shift. Now, if we have a training set of this kind, so let's say that we have just to classify class 0 or class 1, and the problem is to focusing on circles with respect to triangle, our classification model can perform well. So let's say that we train well our model, but it relies also on side information, which is the color of our data. So for instance, orange, blue in one case and yellow and green in the other. Right? So the fact that we are relying on this side information then at test time can create confusion and can create errors, because we might be in a condition where we also see some triangle which are orange or some circles which are green. And so we make mistake because originally the bias present in the data was associating this side information like the color also to some particular shape. So if this bias is there, then we necessarily have more errors at test time and will not be able to generalize. So avoiding this dataset bias is crucially one of the problems also in a particular task of machine learning and computer vision. So how can we actually avoid that? Well, the idea is to search for representations of our data, which are actually unbiased. So they do not rely on the side information. They just focus on the key crucial information that are needed to take a decision. So let's just visualize a deep model in this way. It's really just a schematic representation. So we have our source data, we develop an algorithm, which is in practice extracting information from the data and then elaborate a decision at the end. Now, what we can do is, in the case of domain adaptation, is to have a look of what will be the deployment condition of our model. So let's say this is our source data, the training data, but then we have a look also at the condition in which we will apply our model, which might be slightly different with respect to what we have at training time. Possibly the source data can be annotated. So the source data is the kind of data on which we can actually build our final decision. The target data, so the deployment time condition data, they are not labeled, right? So it's our test data, so they are not annotated. Still, we might have a look at them, so just the appearance, how they look, and include them in the algorithm. How? Well, we can just ask the network to take into consideration this extra information. So impose a condition that look at how source and target data differ. And in practice, so we can ask the algorithm to not rely on some specific characteristics that make source and target different. So let me be even more specific, going back to the example that we were looking at before. So if we have daylight images and night images, although we don't know for the night images if image per image the correct decision is to go left or right, or I mean the specific label of the prediction related to the decision, still we can look at the images and ask the network to discriminate between these kind of images, so the images of daylight and the images at night. Then in the network, we can invert the gradient. In practice, we inverted the optimization. So instead of trying to make them far apart, so different, we actually search for a representation that make them overlap. If we are able to make them overlap, then the decision that we take on the labeled images will ignore the appearance difference between these two groups of data. And so it will be able to take a decision that will perform well also on new images. So images of at night or foggy condition or different weather condition, because it has avoided to focus on the characteristics which are not relevant to take the real decision. So the problem at this point is how to go from this high-level structure of learning model applied for images and dealing with dataset bias or the appearance of the images to real tasks related to fairness, for instance. So here I'm giving an example, just an image of one case. So the case of a bride, Western bride, so a light skin color girl with respect to the colored girl, and also completely different colors. When we define a bride, we think about a white dress in the Western world. In India, for instance, the colors are completely different. So it has been shown that in Nature, there's an article discussing the fact that this algorithm classifying images was failing to classify a bride of the western part of the eastern part of the world. So the point is, when we have this kind of condition, how can we, so what is the exact correct metric that I have to use here to tell the network that the extra information, so the protected attributes, should not be taken into consideration? The situation is not easy, because how to formalize fairness is a little bit, I mean, it's complicated. Mathematically and statistically, there has been defined several metrics. The goal here would be try to optimize the network to take the good decisions, so recognize an object, for instance, but at the same time, forget about the protected attributes, and there are some metrics to do that. But as I said, these metrics, they come, let's say, from the world of statistics. They might not all fit to the exact task that we are dealing with. And moreover, there are theorems that demonstrate that we cannot all take into consideration all the possible metrics at the same time. So if one is true, the other will not be true, so we cannot combine them all together. This clearly makes things a lot complicated when we want to pass from algorithms that are used normally for domain bias and domain shift, for instance, in computer vision, to applications that include fairness. There's also another aspect to take into consideration. So here we are thinking about algorithm like deep learning models. So many layers of neural networks stuck together that they try to model very complex function. But it's very difficult to explain exactly the causal relationship, and if there are causal relationship that the network is using. And indeed, instead, what we would like to have are there algorithms that not only works well, that are fair, and possibly they are also explainable. So they can connect, let's say, the cause and effect when taking a decision. And this makes things, again, even more complicated because the model has to be formulated in a certain way to take this causal relation into account. Moreover, there's another aspect. Whenever we use an algorithm to take fair decision, we have to analyze it also in time, because it might induce some effect. So the decision that we take, then in time, they can change the way in which new samples are labeled. And so the decision should not be just one step, but it has to be observed in terms of times, considering the dynamics of the whole process, and also the dynamics of how society changed. So as you can understand, it's quite a difficult process. So how to pass, let's say, from the standard formalism of deep model AI learning structures to what does it mean to have really fair algorithms and fair models. So overall, what I can just say is that if we look back at the whole chain of process, then for sure we have to start to be, let's say, very clear on how fair the data are. So what are the protected attributes that we have to take into consideration, depending on the task, depending on the problem that we want to solve. And for sure, I mean, all the tools also as the one that Mary was explaining, was presenting, can be very helpful in that. And then we have also to take into consideration the fact that there might be methods that help to improve, to make the data more fair since the beginning. So even before letting the data enter an AI algorithm. In terms of AI algorithm, well, we have to really be able to find the correct metrics to evaluate fairness, eventually exclude some of the criteria, because we said not all are correct and not all can be used together. And another important point is that when we develop these models, and we include the extra condition on fairness, we might lose a little bit in the accuracy of the model, on the decision, on the main decision of the model itself. So there's always a trade-off between how fair we want to be with respect to how accurate in terms of prediction we want to be. So this has to be clear, and we have to maintain transparency on this. So the people who use then this model have to understand that maybe the performance went down from, I don't know, 98% of accuracy to 97%, but the algorithm is more fair because it's taking into consideration some ethics principles, some condition that we added. And then, of course, also the human review. I mean, as I mentioned, we have to be aware of how the algorithms are used. They have to come with specific indications. So if the algorithm was developed for one, say, task, it cannot be used in a different way. That might not be correct. The data, so the models often are pre-trained. And so it has to be also clear how the models was pertained, so which data were used. All this information have to come with the model and be provided to the persons that then use them. And then, of course, we have to be clear also on the consequences of using the model in let's say, an unfair or in a wrong way. So that's all on my side. Just to mention that, of course, how to make algorithm more trustworthy, it's really a huge area of research at the moment, and there are many questions that we are trying to answer, and how to go from this research study to something that really is a standard or general rule. It's a difficult part, and we are all working from different point of view to make it, so to realize this, all this. Okay.
Then I have a question. I don't know if anybody else has questions.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, my first question is whether there is any formal definition of trustworthiness, because we speak about trustworthiness, but if there is, a formal definition that would be nice. Not only this, if it's a mathematically quantifiable definition that could have been even better.
Well, let me just say this. In the latest work definition, and I mean, on the latest conferences just discussing on fairness, it came out there are more than 21 definition of fairness. There's not just one,
Okay.
right? And this extends also to trustworthy and all the connected, I mean, terms, also explainability. So all these terms, they do not have just one single explanation, and they do not have just one single operative way to realize them.
So this means the European Commission is about to spend some millions of euros in research on an ill-defined topic, which is of course very interesting, but that's another story. Anyway, I have another question.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any, when we speak about bias, my mind always goes to more data, especially for underrepresented populations. But this could be, let's say, there could be a contradiction between bias and privacy, because some of these groups may have a strong sense of privacy. They don't give data out, and then as a result, the systems are biased. Is there a real contradiction there or not really?
Well, there is. Let's say that there are two aspects on the problem. So one side, you can increase the collection of data. So you might have very big data set, and this is one direction that research is taking. There is one problem though. I mean, when you collect a lot of data, often they are completely unlabeled. So you just collect them, and you don't have supervision. Then you can build an unsupervised model. But the point is that in this big quantity of data, there might be even, let's say, negative bias in the sense that they can create even that just collecting dialogue. There was a lot of and then the language model that you obtain is so. We have to be careful in just saying that we can collect a lot of data and do not, let's say, run any kind of supervision on them, because then it's risky. The other point is related to privacy. Yes, true. There is a sort of contradiction in the sense that in some cases, you analyze your data and you realize that if you want to be fair, you have to possibly include some, I don't know, minority group. And then you have to go to the minority group and ask explicitly for data to fill in your data set, which does not work well, because it means that maybe they didn't want to be part of the data set that you originally tried to construct. So yes, it's quite complicated. If you think in general, it's complicated even the fact that when you say that your algorithm, you want an algorithm to be fair. So let's say that it is related to the fact that you decide or not to give a person a loan, let's say a bank. So I have an algorithm to evaluate on the basis of certain characteristics if this person can have credit or not from the bank. Then let's suppose you don't give the credit to the person, right? You cannot think about then tracking the person and check if that person asked to another bank and then eventually evaluate if he was able to repay the loan or not. So it's a very complicated topic, because it has also privacy included in all this research. Yes.
Thank you. There is one more question by Klaus.
Yeah, thank you, Johannes, and thank you, Tatiana. I have simply to use this opportunity to talk to those specialists, and my question is a little bit related to what Johannes put forward. And that is how to get those data from specific groups where also privacy may play a role. And the background of my question is I had a talk with a company which is working then with synthetic data. So, and I would simply like to know from you what you find of that. I'm from the legal business, and for me it has had a high intuition, but maybe something is wrong to work with these synthetic data, or there is a specific problem behind. And I would simply like to use this opportunity to ask into this direction.
Right. Yes. Interesting. So this aspect of synthetic data is really interesting. Let me give you an example. I mean, there has been studies that demonstrated how originally deep learning model trained for face recognition, apparently they were working well for light-skinned people and then were not working well with for dark-skinned people, right? So they put out this information. I mean, this problem, and then other people started to study this issue, analyzing better the algorithm, and then they ended up deciding to not rely on the same data and to create a synthetic data set, because it turned out that the problem of the original study was not related only to the model itself that had a bias, but to the data, because in the group, for instance, there was a bias due to the fact that there were some women, so the women had only long hair, and instead the men, I mean, there was a bias related also to the length of the hair and other information. And so they created instead, so this other group decided to create a synthetic data set with, I don't know if you heard about, so the GAN methods, so the generative adversarial models, they developed a synthetic data set. So it turned out that extensive analysis of the algorithm, then with this new data, they did not have that specific bias. So there was no more the bias related to the color of the skin, because the data set was balanced, so it was better balanced, and so the problem went away. But then it turned out that the way in which they were synthetically generating images had other biases, because they were creating a female always with earrings. And this was, I mean, there's no reason why that should be present. And then there was also creating instead so if a man had long hair, then it had also a beard. So there were correlations. So of course, synthetic data is useful, but again, it might induce further biases. So yeah,
okay,
that's the story.
Thank you very much.
And then I suppose that we're done with this panel. Please send me your transparencies, because we're going to upload everything in the web page. Sure. And also, if you think that you can formulate more exact questions or challenges that can be presented to PhD students for further research, please do so and send it to us. We're going to try and create a type of AI research white paper.
Okay, sure. Let me thank again all the panelists, and yeah, goodbye everybody.
I'm very pleased to see that there is also new startups that take up such ideas about fairness and trustworthiness, and I hope that I suppose the European Union hopes that a niche market is going to be created around these technologies, and that Europe is going to excel in these technologies. It would be nice to know if there is any study on the possible size of this niche market, but maybe in the third panel today we can discuss these issues. Thank you very much again. And now, Klaus, this is your turn.